And I think they asked me if I would return, and I'm a social scientist. I think I'm also an ex-hippie. Um, but I told them that I would talk a little bit about the science of happiness, the as really somebody who would define himself as an old hippie. My peace loving granola days were very much spent trying to figure out what made me happy. And I was very disappointed by my education in the field of psychology, very disappointed. Because it really wasn't about what made people happy. It was about what made people miserable. And honestly, like I never had an aspiration to be like a high priest of unhappiness, which is almost what a therapist is. And I really did not want to be someone who spent their life in a little dingy room with unhappy people coming in. Like it just, it didn't make any sense to me. But I mean, it's hard to even fathom how long ago, like the kind of stuff that's now normative, people my age did in an exploratory way. So, you didn't have yoga places on street corners, and you literally didn't have granola in supermarkets. I mean, I remember a friend of mine and his girlfriend, we almost blew up their rental house making granola on a stove because you couldn't just go to Safeway and buy granola. So here we are, we're putting oil and oats and raisins, and the thing almost caught on fire. But there was something running through that time of when meditation for the first time really came into the United States and became available. Of course, like I've had a meditation practice now for decades. But it was always predicated on this, well, what is it that makes us happy? And I grew up enough of a kind of middle class background where I knew in my bones that simply having a nice house and sending my kids to a nice school, I knew in my bones that that was not enough to make people happy, and needing more material things. I mean, again, this is a 60s, 70s thing. Needing more material things wasn't going to get it done also. Like I just knew that. I lived in the kind of neighborhood where my parents' home was modest. It was like a 1-story, 3-bedroom, like home in the suburbs. I mean, the kind of home that they don't make anymore. Because, I mean, as a social scientist, I know that back in the 60s and 70s, the average American home built was about 1,300 square feet. And now it's 2,300 square feet. So the need has increased dramatically. The satisfaction hasn't. But I saw even then as a somewhat privileged kid. I mean, I never had to worry about whether there was food to eat, and I knew my parents could send me to a state university. I mean, I knew they had that kind of resources. They didn't have more than that. But I understood that there was something much, much deeper than simply material affluence and things. I mean, this again is like the peace, love, and granola stuff, but I knew it. I didn't necessarily know what that was, but I knew it. And When I got to Stanford as a student, I was already a licensed therapist. So I got a doctorate later in life from Stanford. I mean, I was about 40, but I already had a marriage and family license, and I was already a licensed therapist. And I knew, like, this isn't quite what I want to do. Like, I don't want unhappy people just coming in to talk to me about their unhappiness. And there was no positive psychology movement at all. So I didn't know what to do with my insights. I had been, when I started at Stanford, I had been a school psychologist for, at that time, maybe 6, 8 years. And I knew that wasn't it either, because the kids that they referred to me were the kids who were failing. And again, it's a one-dimensional way of looking at things. And it's not that I had anything against kids that were failing. Some of the issues I had with being a school psychologist was that a lot of the problems were from the school, not the kid. And that often they were trying to get kids to be a certain flavor, and the kids were a different flavor. And anyway, but when I got to Stanford, I recognized that I had an opportunity, because I was re-educating myself, to see if I can actually talk about what interests me, which is, what does it take from a psychology to live a life that feels good? I mean, it's that simple. What does that mean, to live a life that feels good? What does it mean to have an inner sense of satisfaction with one's life? And what does it mean? What does it even empirically mean to be happy? And I was at a department where nobody was interested in those questions. I mean, they weren't disinterested, they weren't interested, they weren't questing for that. And by that time, I had had close to a 20-year meditation practice. So I understood inside of myself that there are timeless wisdom practices that have asked and answered some of these questions for thousands of years. What does it take to be happy? What does it take to be content? And what does it take, I'm going to say, to be the kind of person that other people like want to hang out with? And those are not the normal questions of psychology. They were not, and they're still marginal. They're more now than they were. So I had a friend on Stanford's campus who I met, and she was the head of wellness services for the campus. So she was the kind of person who had the same questions that I did. And I was a graduate student, and we started to try to ask those questions on Stanford's campus. So what would it mean to educate these students to be happier people? And how would we know it? And how can we prepare them for a life where they're not just like highly achievement oriented and highly status oriented, but also inner directed in a way that will lead them to select out of their environment experiences that might actually lead to happiness. So at about that time, which is the mid-90s, I mean, I'm sure some of you weren't even born then, which is like, this is what gets weird when you get older. Like, you tell people about your history and they're treating it like it's the Civil War. But you know, I'm just, but we decided between us that, hey, these are some of the questions that are important to us. They have to be important to other people. So I had the opportunity at that time to lead a master's degree in health psychology. She was the head of wellness. And we started reading the emerging literature on happiness. And the strongest themes of that literature on happiness are that happiness depends on only really three things. These things are vague and big, but there are really only three things. One of them is, do you have a positive purpose in life? Do you have a positive purpose in life? 1A, is that purpose not just about you? So you can have a positive purpose to be the wealthiest person in the world. That doesn't get it done in the same way as I want to be wealthy, but I want to contribute to humanity. So having a positive purpose is one of the things that contributes. 2, people. Do you orient towards humans, not things, not possessions, not achievement, not status, but humans? And 3, do you have some capacity of mindfulness so that you can actually savor your life rather than it rushing by? So those are the 3 basic foundational issues of happy people and its pursuit. What are you doing here on the planet? They have found through research that people whose purpose is pleasure don't end up very happy. That sensuality, while if it's mindfully done and appreciated, can contribute to happiness. But when pleasure is your goal, you end up making not so good decisions, as anybody who knows people who eat too much or drink too much or have sex too much or are simply lazy. But that was one of the real findings of this work, is that pleasure tends not to be the goal of people who are the happiest. They get pleasure from things that they're doing, and they appreciate the experiences in their life, but they're not like harshly oriented so that all day long they have to be feeding themselves. So that's quite something that research can show. But the relationship piece, that turns out to be ever expanding in terms of what makes people happy. When this research first started 20 plus years ago, relationships were at the top. But now there's so much more nuance about what we know about relationships and how they make us have better lives, that the research has deepened. So even at work, it's very clear now that one of the most important parts of what makes people happy at work is relationship. It's not as much salary, even though if you don't pay anybody, that sucks. And they, will want something better. But having positive relationships at work has huge loading on people's feeling of being wanted, enjoying, and making them like contribute to work. Secondly, you've all heard this. We don't leave jobs so much as bad managers. Like that's another more robust finding. We leave the assholes who are our bosses. Honestly, people can tolerate low wages more than they can tolerate abuse. And people can tolerate low wages more than they can tolerate disrespect, even though I'm not advocating for low wages. But we leave bad bosses and we stay for good relationships. Nothing in research is yes or no. Any of you who have been to college, you know that when something says it's towards something, it might be for 65% of the population and 35% is different. But that's a huge advance in understanding from I don't know. But here's the other piece about relationships, the kind of things that are actionable. One, it matters whether you have close relationships, not just numbers of relationships. It's not having 40 people, it's having 4 that really matter. And one of the great things that is crushing America's happiness is their answer to a really simple question. If you're in need, how many people can you call on and depend that they'll help you? That question predicts mortality, not just happiness. Now, I want to say that again, because there's something really remarkable about that. That question predicts mortality. So people who have fewer people that they can depend on die more readily. They recover from illness with less ease. And the number of people that the average American can depend on is shrinking. So 30 years ago, when the research started, the average American said 4.2. And it doesn't mean that you have 4 people in somebody's arm. It's on average, it's 4.2 people that the average American said I can depend upon. It's now under 3. What is so compelling about relationship is when we know that people care, we have much less stress. It's a psychophysiologic thing as well as just a happiness thing. When we know we're not alone in the world, then our arousal of our nervous system is less generally. 2, when hardships come up and we know we can depend on people, we have schema in our head that say, well, it's not going to be that bad because you know X, Y, and Z will help. So this is part of the way it impacts both health and your emotional outlook. Another thing, when you have close relationships, you have purpose. The isolated, the too busy, the people who are only on their computer all day. The people without close connection lack a certain kind of purpose because some of our deepest purposes are other people need us. It's not just that we can depend on them, but our life depends on others needing us, which is why it's relationship that is so important, not just one-sided interactions. The last major study that looked at this said, and this is a long-term study, said that the single most important thing that human beings need to cultivate over a lifetime to feel that they have had a successful life is the ability to give and receive love. That is the defining human experience of learning and purpose. The developing capacity to give and receive love is the most important predictor of happiness and purpose. So just think about that. I mean, I think of that at Stanford. And I'm not sure at some level that these young people are getting all of the proper education they can, because they're not getting an education to some degree in some quarters about what will actually make them happy. And it's not that achievement makes you unhappy. It's that it doesn't have that much impact either way. That there are so many ways to achieve, but there are only a modest number of ways to love. And loving always involves other human beings that you need to anticipate their needs. You need to give them time. You need to listen to them. They've now understood that the basis of a long-term intimate partnership is some combination of gratitude and kindness. They used to have all these fancy formulas, like 2 parts attention and 3-part conflict resolution. And those are good, and like 9 parts this. But when they parse the research now, it's, does the partnership, the unit, the bi-directional communication, does it have a lot of kindness? And do the people see the kindness and say thank you? We can all learn to do that. You don't have to have a Stanford degree. You don't even have to. I mean, I'm not arguing for not going to school, but you don't even need a college degree to be kind. And you don't need a college degree to say thank you for when people are kind to you. So what for my journey, this friend of mine and I, we started teaching a happiness class on campus in 2008. And we taught it for 9 years. And when we started, it was so foreign to the Stanford culture that we went to the Department of Psychology. They said, why would anybody be interested in happiness? We went to the School of Education. They said, why would anybody interested in happiness? We went to the sociology department. We went to home bio. We went to anybody. We're stopping people on the street corner. And nobody would promote us. Neither of us were professors. So I was a researcher and she was an administrative position. So nobody would promote us. Her boss saw us wandering all around campus, and he was the director of health services at Stanford at Vaden Health Center. And he saw us wandering around with like our little begging bowl. And he said, he didn't actually say, I'm taking pity on you, but that's what he said. I'm just going to sponsor your class. Like, I have an appointment in the Department of Pediatrics. He was a pediatrician who was the head of Vaden Health Center. He said, so I don't know what you're going to think about this, but there's going to be 11 classes for doctors studying to be pediatricians in their residency, and your class, The Pursuit of Happiness. But that's now the Department of Pediatrics. So we spent all of our 9 years in the Department of Pediatrics as an afterthought, because no other part of campus would do that. And we did research, being at Stanford and being interested. We took a couple of cohorts of Stanford students who took our class. So we'd give them a battery of tests in August or September, whenever Stanford starts in mid-September. So let's say September 20th, their first class, we'd have them take like 6 assessments. And then December 15th, when the quarter's done, we'd have them take the same 6 assessment. We did that for 3 years, and we were able to show that students who took a class that was focused on both academics and their own personal growth showed less stress, less anger, more hopefulness over the course of a 10-week quarter, and they learned something. So as a consequence of that, myself and 2 other friends, we started a program in the medical school called Wellness Education. And now it's part of Stanford, where they teach 6 or 8 different wellness classes each quarter so that students can learn this stuff. Let me give you, because I don't have that long to talk. Let me give you a simple practice that I'm going to ask you to join me for. If you'd all please close your eyes. I teach a bit by meditation and guided imagery. But I'd like it if you'd be willing to close your eyes for, I'm going to say a moment, but that would be a lie, maybe 3-4 minutes. So if you'd all get comfortable where you are. And I use that word, I mean that word, please get comfortable. Please get comfortable. And there's no fancy meditation posture. Like, I'm not checking that. Just get comfortable, like this is 4 minutes. Relax. Just relax where you are. And please allow like your shoulders to relax and your breathing to relax. And most importantly, allow your abdomen to relax. If you want to be happy, you can't hold in your belly and tighten your breathing. Neurologically, holding in your belly and tightening your breathing is a sign of danger. And your brain will not allow happy thoughts when you're in danger. I mean, that's a simplification, but it's true enough. So I'm asking you please to trust enough that you can relax your abdomen. It's a trust, because no animal in nature will allow its abdomen to be open unless it's safe. And we are still animals in nature. But for us, the safety can be memories or what comes next. You want to practice being present enough inside of yourself that you know you're safe and you can relax your belly. And so when you inhale, your abdomen expands. And when you exhale, your abdomen contracts. And it's the only thing that matters is the quietness of your breathing and the gentleness of your breathing. Gentle and soft and quiet breathing. And then the question that I'm going to ask you to ask yourself is one that I ask all over now because it's such a simple question. If you look at your last, say, 48 hours, who's been kind to you? You want to look at like the last 2 days of your life and you want to slow the tape down. You want to slow it down so you can ask, where was I well treated? Where did somebody offer me help, care, guidance, love? Where did somebody listen to me complain? Did anybody make me dinner? Did anybody do my laundry? Did anybody help me in any way? And I want you to see if you can look at your last couple of days and find kindness towards you. And I want you to identify one particular experience and from your own center, say thank you. Just from your heart, your center, please say thank you. Almost from your heart, like from your actual center, feel it and say thank you. Just thank you. And then just let that go. Let the feeling go, let the thank you go. Just let that go. Take a breath and gently open your eyes. So, two comments about that. One, happiness is now. Like that's another robust finding where the meditation traditions understood this thousands of years ago. Happiness is now. It doesn't mean you don't plan. It's important to plan. Otherwise, you'll starve to death or you will never cross the street. I mean, you got to plan. But happiness is only an experience of right now, that right now your life is okay. It's safe, it's valuable, it's good. You love and are loved. You have purpose, something. But happiness is right now. And it's not in the attainment of something else. Now, it's very good to have goals. It's essential. And goals are necessary, and making progress on goals is good, but it's the experience at this moment that's happy. So, yeah, you can say, I want to be a physician, or I want to buy a nice house, or I want to go traveling. That's all great. But the happiness is now. So the happiness is, yeah, I want to be a physician, but right now I'm fine being a bum. You know, whatever you are now, it's now. The only way to be happy in a relationship with someone is now, not when they improve. You can still want them to improve, but the happiness is now. Albert Schweitzer is the latest iteration of the best definition of happiness that I know, which is wanting what you have. That's happiness. Understand that stress is wanting anything else. We actually need both to fully prosper. But unfortunately, stress takes over the mind and clouds out present centered happiness. We can get lost in our futures and what we don't have. The other piece, besides that, happiness is now. And I'm just trying to give you, I'm going to give you one more practice before I stop. But what we also are not educated in as humans, and I see this all over at Stanford, um, all kindness is chosen. It doesn't have to be. So every time one of your parents is kind to you, or one of your partners, or one of your friends, they're choosing to do so. We don't recognize that. We think they have to, or they owe it to us, or they promise. Nobody has to be kind ever. It's a choice. So that's why gratitude and kindness are the centerpiece of healthy relationship. It's I'm thankful that you choose to be nice. And I choose to be nice to you. I don't have to. You may, I mean, there are marriage vows of all sorts of things, but people break those marriage vows all over the place. So just taking a vow doesn't mean you have to be anything. The data that I understand is about a third of married people acknowledge cheating in their marriage sexually. About a third. So that's a high percentage. It's like, it's not like we're talking like an occasional thing here. Now, it's not that a third of people are cheating right now. It's that a third of people over the lifetime of a marriage have cheated. And it's slightly more men than women, even though I don't think that shocks anybody. But it is. But recognize, this is what I'm getting at. Anytime your partner chooses to come home and chooses to be kind, they've chosen it. And if we could see a little more of that, then we have better relationships. That's why that kind of practice is so important. Who's been kind to me? Well, they don't have to, but they chose to. It's what we don't recognize is the amount of gifts we're given. Now, it's partly our biology that wires us to take things for granted that are normal, so we can save so much biological energy for threat and newness. That's partly our wiring to take things and people for granted. But as human beings who are not on the brink of starvation, we have choice. And we can choose to see a little more when people are kind to us. And we can choose to say thank you at a minimum. One more study result, then I'm going to give you one more practice, then I'm going to stop. Study result is there is data, and I'm not making any comment on the data, but in male-female long-term partnerships, there are more women givers than men. I'm just, that's data. I don't know exactly how much more, but there are more. And they have taken couples who are in argument because of the giver-taker balance, so to speak. And as an intermediate step to teaching the taker partner to give more, The intermediate step that they can teach that makes a difference is to get the taker to at least recognize how much they're given and sincerely say thank you. Just to sincerely say thank you, not thank you, now what's for dinner? It's thank you. So what I'm trying to lead this little lesson is be careful not to take the people in your life for granted. Know that your brain has a tendency to do that. And see if you can train your attention a little more to notice kindness and say thank you. Okay, one more practice and I'm going to stop. Here's what I'd like you to do. Turn to somebody near you. This is not a deeply revealing exercise, so even if the person's weird, you can still turn to them. Because there are weird people in places, you know what I mean? It's like, but here's what I'd like you to have a conversation with. Share and only make this safe sharing. I mean, it's not a tough topic, but be safe. When was a recent time, somewhere, last while, where you knew you were loved? And you want to describe both what the experience was and what the feeling was. Because one of the other happiness truths is the more we go there, the easier it is for the mind to remember and look for it. So our brains will naturally have us focus on all the ways people were not kind to us. That's its safety mechanism. But it doesn't need to remind you that, oh yeah, that's right. 2 months ago, when you were unhappy and your best friend listened for 4 hours, you knew you were loved. But if you can bring that front and center, hold it, that strengthens neural connections and makes you happier. Okay, please find a partner, have a conversation about this for just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, everyone. I told the women who like invited me here that I have spent this summer teaching at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And there's like a couple of hundred successful business people from all over the world taking a 6-week executive education program. And I'm like the mindfulness, be a nice human being teacher. And that this is my first teaching, like just like living room type stuff in a while. And it's a nice break. I have to, just seeing people in couches and wearing t-shirts. It's like nice. Anyway, I hope you learned something from my little meanderings, and I thank you.